The other day I was watching a program on a TV channel here in Ireland called TV3, and it was called The Sex Trade. Now this program was about the growing levels of exploitation of women here in Ireland. Often they are foreign women that are brought in specifically here to work in prostitution. But it is a growing problem. It is happening more and more here in Ireland. The program itself was quite interesting and quite informative as well. But I saw red towards the end of the program, when the narrator saw fit to start listing reasons that she thought were contributory factors to this problem. Now, many of the reasons she gave were perfectly valid, I think, but there was one reason she gave that was completely unacceptable, and that was growing secularization. She listed growing secularization as one of the contributing factors to the rising levels of this problem. It took me a minute as well, but then I saw red. Imagine if she had said that this problem was due to the growing Islamization of Irish society. How would that have gone down, you think? And not just with Muslims, but with anybody. That would have been a horrible, bigoted thing to say. And it wouldn't be accepted. It would have been exposed as bigotry, and people would have been talking about it. If she had blamed this on the rising numbers of Jews in this country, there would have been uproar, there would have been shouts of anti-Semitism, and quite rightly so. It would have been completely unacceptable. If she had included foreigners, blacks or travelers as a contributing factor to this problem, there would have been shouts of racism. There would have been ructions. Again, this would have been completely unacceptable. But she can say rising secularism, and nobody bats an eyelid. It even took me a while to cop on. I sat here and the alarm bell started ringing, and it took me a while to realize what I had just heard and what that meant. And I had to explain to my wife as well, because she didn't get it when I said. She just said that rising secularism was a cause of this problem. And she said, yeah, what? This is completely unacceptable, folks. Everybody should know that all human beings who are emotionally healthy have an innate sense of morality. To claim that rising secularism has anything to do with this problem is based on the common prejudice that people who are not religious are somehow immoral or amoral. And that is nonsense. But it is such a commonly held prejudice that people don't even realize when it rears its ugly head and when it's being said on a public forum like television. And they say something like this, and it goes in one ear, comes out another, but in the meantime it reinforces something in there. And that is something that we need to stand up against. We, and by we I mean atheists, agnostics, humanists, and anybody else who would not call themselves religious, we should not tolerate anymore being made a scapegoat for all the real or perceived ills of society anymore. We are not to blame for this. The fact that society is moving away from a religious basis is not to blame for this. And we are not taking this shit anymore. So people say, for example, why are atheists being so vocal lately? This is why. Because something like this, in our society today, can still be said and nobody bats an eyelid. Nobody thinks there's anything wrong with saying something like that. And that is why we should keep speaking out. When saying something as prejudiced like this about people who are not religious becomes as politically incorrect as saying something about blacks or Jews or travelers or whatnot, that is when we might consider shutting up about this. But until then, we've got a lot of work to do still. And society has got a long way to go before that problem has been corrected.